In this video, you will see the story of horror movie. The film tells the story of Arnie Cunningham, a nerd who buys a 1958 Plymouth Fury named Christine that seems to have a mind of its own. The car's evil influence changes Arnie's nature and affects the lives of his friends, family, and enemies. So let's dive into the story. The story kicks off in 1950 at a car factory where a few cars were being assembled. One of them was a special red car that a mechanic was working on. While he was checking the engine, the hood suddenly slammed shut and hurt his hand really bad. They rushed him to the doctor. After that, another mechanic came by to check the car, and while he was inside, ash from his cigar fell onto the seat. A few hours went by, and the factory was closing up for the day. Everyone was heading home, but as they were leaving, the supervisor saw that the red car's lights were still on. When he opened it, a mechanic's body with a cigar dropped out. That was 28 years ago. Now we see a student named Dennis, who just got to his friend Arnie's place. Arnie was pretty much the goody, nerdy type. Dennis and Arnie were pretty different, but they hit it off right away. It was their first day of school. When they got there, they grabbed their new books from their lockers, and that's when they noticed a new girl named Lee. There was this girl whose looks drove all the guys in school wild. Later, when Dennis and Ernie were on their way home, Ernie suddenly spotted a car outside a house and told Dennis to stop immediately. As they got closer, they realized it was a classic red car, the same one we saw at the start of the story. But now it was all banged up. Ernie didn't care one bit. He fell head over heels for the car right then and there. Just then, the owner, George, came out and said the car's name was Christine, and it belonged to his brother, olded him. But Arnie didn't listen to her because he had bought the car with his own savings. It's a car that broke down a few weeks back. George wanted to get rid of it, so he was ready to sell it for only $250. Dennis told Arnie, "Why are you throwing money at that piece of junk? Just get something else." But Arnie went ahead and bought the car anyway. Later that night, when he got home, his parents found out he bought it, and his mom was really upset. Arnie replied that he didn't choose the car chose him. The next day during lunch, Dennis was waiting this bully named Buddy picking on Arnie. Dennis tried to step in, but Buddy just threw Arnie's lunch on the ground and knocked him, and Buddy stomped on them and broke them. Then Buddy started laughing at Arnie's situation, but that's when Dennis saw his chance and attacked Buddy. However, Buddy's gang quickly surrounded Dennis. Luckily, a teacher showed up and broke up the fight. Arnie then told the teacher that Buddy had threatened him with a knife, and the teacher made him empty his pockets. He pulled out that same knife from his pocket. Eventually, the teacher sent Buddy and his buddies to the office, and after that, Buddy got kicked out of school. Weeks went by like this, and Arnie was working day and night trying to fix the car. After that, the garage owner offered Arnie a job to help out at the garage, and in return, Arnie could gather some parts for his car. Arnie agreed, and then threw himself into fixing the car, but he didn't even realize how much time he was spending on it. When they asked him to do it, Arnie and his new car, because they had found out something about it, Christine got really close to him, and later that evening he went to hang out with Dennis and Arnie since it had been a while. But he noticed Arnie had changed a lot. He was strutting around like a tough guy in trendy clothes and without his glasses. He barely chatted with Dennis before heading off to work in the garage. His mom tried to stop him, but Arnie just brushed her off and took off. Then she told Dennis that she was really worried about him. When he tried to open it, the radio turned on by itself, and Dennis got so scared that he bolted. The next morning, he found himself at the school stadium. Dennis hurried to meet George after hearing about the previous owner dying from suffocation in the car. George told him his brother's story, how he had totally fallen for Christine when he bought her. His wife and daughter also died in that same car. After his brother passed away, the car somehow ended up in the garage all by itself. Everyone. This made Dennis a bit mad and distracted him from the game. Taking advantage of the moment, the opposing player shoved him and stole the ball. The push was so hard that Dennis fell to the ground and was knocked out cold. Dennis was totally fixated on scoring an epic goal in today's soccer match when he suddenly saw Arnie pull up. His car looked slick, and both Big and his buddies were caught off guard. Meanwhile, Leave got out of the car and kissed Arnie right there in front of everyone. Him and Dennis realized his friend was changing way too fast. A few days after it all happened, Dennis finally woke up and realized he was in a hospital with a cast on his leg and neck. That's when Arnie came to check on him. Later that evening, Dennis went to the movies with Lee, and after the show, they started kissing in the car. But when things got heated, Lee suddenly got out of the car. Arnie went after her and Lee said, "You love this car more than you love me." Arnie found her words really strange, but he managed to convince Lee to get back in the car. Inside, Lee was about to snack on something when the car radio turned on by itself. At that moment, a bright light flashed from the dashboard, and Lee felt like she was choking and couldn't breathe. Arnie immediately ran to help her, but the car was locked from the inside. Arnie was really worried. He kept trying to open the car door from the outside, but nothing worked. Just when she was about to suffocate, she finally managed to open the door from the inside. At that moment, a guy standing nearby pulled her out. Seeing this, Arnie got mad and attacked him, feeling fed up, but the guy was just trying to get the food stuck in Lee's throat out. Eventually things calmed down, and Arnie took Lee back home. As soon as she got out of the car, she rushed inside and said she didn't want to talk to Arnie. He tried to apologize, but top of that, he thought Christine was jealous of him because every time they all got together in the car, something would go wrong. Hearing all this, Arnie figured that Lee had lost it, so he said they'd talk tomorrow. Then Arnie got back in the car, but it wouldn't start. While he was talking to Christine, he told her that what happened with Lee today didn't matter, because he would always love her just the same. After that, he grabbed the keys. Lee was sure the car was out to get him, and on. After the drive, the car started right up. He headed straight to the garage and left Christine there. A big guy and his friends rolled into the garage, all armed with different weapons, and in no time, they wrecked the whole car. The next day, Arnie managed to convince Lee to come with him to the garage so he could grab his wallet from the car. But as soon as they walked in and saw the mess Christine was in, Arnie was shocked. Lee, confused, asked who did this, but Arnie suddenly snapped without saying anything, him to go away. Later, Arnie told his parents about it, and they tried to calm him down, saying they would get him a new car. But that just made Arnie angrier, because he knew his parents hated Christine just like Lee did. On top of that, he blamed his parents for Christine's situation, because if they had just let him keep the car at home, she would be fine. So, he shouted. He started saying at him even worse and said things to them and went to his room. His dad grabbed him, sir, from behind, and told him to please apologize to the text his mom. But Arnie, you'd like translated, just kept talking back even more. So, his dad raised his hand at him, but Arnie fought back and quietly walked out of the house. He went straight to Christine and decided to fix her up piece by piece again. But what he saw next made his jaw drop. It was like the car was magically fixing itself. Then, in the middle of the night, we see this girl named Machi, who was Biggie's partner in crime. She was robbing a truck right in the middle of the road, just. Suddenly, she heard the sound of a car engine from a distance like before. When she got a bit closer, she realized, it was Christine, totally new and parked right were up to no in front of her good. She thought Arnie must be in the car, and it dawned on her that Arnie had figured out she was the one who teamed up with Biggie to mess up Christine's ride. So she started begging Arnie for forgiveness, but out of nowhere, the car's headlights turned on and blazed bright. Mucci started running towards the alley, and just then, he managed to escape and hid in a side street. Mucci ran into an old warehouse, but Christine didn't back off. Eventually, Mucci got cornered, and there was no way out. He pulled out his knife and threatened Arnie, but Christine forced her way in and brutally took him down. The next morning, Arnie went to meet Dennis to talk about Mucci. Really taken aback, he couldn't wrap his head around how Christine could be fine if she had been completely devastated, but Arnie didn't respond and just walked away. Then Detective Jenkins came to see him and assured him that he was looking for the thugs who attacked Christine. He also mentioned that he was handling the case of Mucci's murder and said he didn't know much about Mucci's death, but he was pretty happy about the news. Hearing this, the detective got suspicious of Kin. Meanwhile, Lee and his friend Don were driving with some drinks, and on the way, another car started tailing them. Don stopped the car to check who was in that vehicle, but the headlights made it hard to see anything. Then, he put his car in reverse, and the other car did the same. Buddy was fuming when he realized the car chasing him was none other than Christine. He sped off in anger and pulled into a gas station where his friend Richie worked. He stepped outside, grabbed a metal pipe, and got ready to teach the guy sure. Christine came racing in and crashed right into Buddy's car, causing a ton of damage. Buddy thought Arnie was still inside, so he shouted for Arnie to get out, but Christine was already speeding back at him again. Biggie crashed into a car and drove it straight into the workshop. Don was sitting in the car, so Christine ran him over with Biggie's car too. At that moment, fuel started leaking, and suddenly it caught fire. A massive explosion rocked the whole garage in no time, and Richie was burned alive in the blaze. Seeing this, Biggie took off to save himself, but Christine, still on fire, started chasing him again. In the end, she ran over Biggie too, and he was burned to ashes right there. After a while, Will heard the sound of a car coming into the garage. He saw that Christine was engulfed in smoke, and he was pretty surprised because Arnie had gone off to fix another car. Now, he grabbed his gun and went to see who was inside Christine. He tried to open the door, but it was way too hot, so he used a cloth skewer. He saw that the car was completely empty. He was totally confused. Then he just got inside the car himself. But now he was about to pay for that mistake because Christine wasn't planning on leaving any witnesses alive today. Suddenly, she slammed the door shut from the inside. When Arnie got to the garage, he saw a bunch of police cars there. He met Detective Junkin and found out that they'd found Will's body and Christine. Arnie said he had no idea how it all happened, but deep down he knew Christine was behind it, because she was once again shining in her spot. Meanwhile, Dennis returned home from the hospital, and Lee called him up saying he violently killed She Wanted Will by slamming him to meet into the... It seems like Christine has completely wrapped Archer knee around her finger, and now he's going crazy, please provide over her, doing all sorts of wild the text stuff. Dennis said he's sure Arnie wouldn't do anything wrong on his own, but if Christine has me to taken over his mind, then something needs to be done about it. After that, Lee went back home, but just a few moments later, Arnie showed up, still all about Christine. He asked Dennis to go for a drive, and Dennis came down. Arnie was acting weird again. Suddenly, he started driving really fast, and then Dennis freaked out when he saw the steering wheel just let go, and he said that Christine wasn't under control. But Arnie weirdly insisted that nothing could come between. Please provide the text him, and you'd like me to Christine. He totally trusted her. To prove his point, Arnie slammed the car into the other lane at full speed, barely avoiding a head-on collision. Seeing his friend on the edge of madness, Dennis left a note on Christine's hood the next day, inviting Arnie to meet in the garage that evening. Later that night, Dennis and Lee, the two of them got into an old beat-up car and brought him inside. They decided that Lee would stay in the office and lock the gate as soon as Arnie arrived, using that chance to take out Christine with a bulldozer. Soon enough, Lee headed to the office, but they had no idea that Christine was hiding in the trash right in the shop. Then the car turned on its headlights and moved forward to crush Lee, who was desperately hanging onto a tire. They were waiting for him at the shop, but when Arnie didn't show up, Dennis grabbed his life shirt. That's when Dennis brought the waiter's claw in front of him to keep Lee safe. After that, Christine stepped back and went to the other end of the workshop while Dennis took the Kren in the opposite direction. Now, both cars were facing each other, and it turned out Christine wasn't alone anymore. Arnie was helping her. Now he was completely under the car's control. Suddenly, the car turned on its headlights, and within seconds, it was completely fixed up. Plus, it was even more than that. For good, it was crashing through everything in its path as it made its way to Lee. But because of that massive impact, Arnie was thrown out, breaking through the windshield. Lee rushed over to check on him, but Arnie suddenly jumped up. Dennis fired up a bulldozer and completely crushed Christine. She was still trying to escape. After the attack, that but crazy car's this time power she was totally wrecked had dropped it. Their battle finally came to an end, and the next day Dennis and Lee met Detective Junkin at the junkyard. There a bit. They all left, but then we saw a tiny piece of Christine start moving on its own, which confirmed that the evil car was still alive.